Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Jacqueline, and in this presentation we'll be looking at behavior as an exceptionality, what it really means, how it's defined, and most importantly, how we can support students and teams around them. I'm sharing this through the lens of my work as a social emotional learning teacher, or SELT, where I'm often called into schools to help when behavior has reached a crisis point. My goal is to shift the lens from misbehavior to stress response. In my experience, what we label as behavior problems are usually kids communicating stress, frustration, or unmet needs. When we look at behavior as a form of communication, not just defiance, everything changes. I'll be in countless classrooms where once we really understand the triggers, whether it's sensory overload, unclear routines, or too many demands, the behavior improved without needing heavy consequences. This matters because the way we respond can either escalate stress or help a child regulate and learn. Behavior as an exceptionality is defined by the ministry as a condition where students' behavior seriously interferes with their learning or the safety of themselves or others. It can look like externalized behavior, like hitting, kicking, running, or yelling, or internalized behaviors like anxiety, withdrawal, or school refusal. In reality, most of the students I work with have layers of needs, sometimes trauma, sometimes neurodivergence, sometimes mental health challenges. The label doesn't always tell the full story. Students are often formally identified with behavior exceptionalities through the IPRC process, usually after multiple incidents or ongoing safety concerns. I always remind school teams the behavior you see is just the symptom. It's what's above the surface. Underneath, there's often stress, sensory overload, skill gaps, or unmet social emotional needs driving those behaviors. If we don't address the root, we're just reacting to the surface. There are a lot of misconceptions about behavior. One of the most common is they're doing it on purpose. In reality, kids do well if they can, to quote Stuart Avalon. Another is he's fine when he wants to be, but masking behavior appears to be fine is exhausting and eventually it falls apart. And probably the biggest misconception is that they just need more consequences. Consequences might stop the behavior temporarily, but they don't teach the missing skills or reduce the stress that causes it. Right now, schools often rely on suspensions or what we call pauses for safety, but these don't actually build long-term skills for students. There are also equity issues. Racialized students are often disciplined more harshly for the same behaviors, and we still have a long way to go with trauma-informed, neurodiversity affirming approaches. Too often, students are excluded instead of supported. This is where we as educators need to shift from a punishment lens to a support lens. Behavior is always communication. Think of it as fight, flight, or freeze response. Common triggers include sensory overload, high demands, or sudden transitions. I had a student who flipped tables every time math started. It wasn't because he hated math, it was because he felt incompetent and he felt shame. When we taught him how to access support before frustration, the table flipping stopped. When we see behavior as stress, we can meet the actual need. Instructionally, relationships come first. I use the 2x10 strategy, 2 minutes of connecting for 10 days to build trust. I also recommend using low demand declarative language. For example, instead of saying, come sit on the carpet, which can trigger fight or flight, particularly with students with ASD and a PDA profile, I might say, everyone's on the carpet. What's your plan? And whenever possible, I connect learning to students' interests. If a student loves vehicles or music, I integrate those themes to increase engagement and reduce stress. The classroom environment makes a huge difference. Predictable routines help students feel safe. Visual schedules need to be interactive, not just wallpaper. They should be something the student checks and uses. I also recommend sensory-friendly spaces with body break stations or calming corners. And most importantly, co-regulation. How we, as the adults, model calm has to be part of the day. Kids borrow our calm when they can't find their own. When it comes to assessment, I use triangulation when working with students with behavior exceptionalities, observations, conversations, and student work. For behavior, I prefer frequency trackers over ABC charts. ABC charts often turn into a diary of teacher frustration, but frequency data helps spot patterns. For example, if you see a student always escalates after second recess, you can put proactive supports in place before that trigger happens. The goal is always prevention, not reaction. Technology can help reduce stress, but it has to be purposeful. Tools like Read and Write can reduce anxiety around reading and writing tasks. There are also apps like Calm Counter that supports self-regulation. But after COVID, I've seen kids completely tune out from too much screen exposure. So my rule is tech should support real connection, not replace it. Sometimes the most powerful tool is just a human being sitting beside a child. What really works is supporting both the student and the team. Proactive body breaks, co-regulation, interest-based learning go a lot further than reactive consequences. One of my proudest moments was helping a student in the behavior intervention plan transition successfully to a new school. We built his plan around his strengths, music and drama. He even was selected to be in the school play. We made sure he met his new teacher before September, and it completely shifted his anxiety about the move. There are a lot of great resources out there. Ministry documents like PPM 156 and PPM 140 outline key supports. The Teach Spec Ed website has strategies for different exceptionalities. So does the York Region District School Board's waterfall document. I also rely on OT sensory strategies and local community resources like the Wabano Center for Indigenous Students. The key is combining these resources with relationship-based practices. Here's the big takeaway. Behavior isn't the problem. It's the student's attempt to solve a problem. When we change the lens, we stop asking, what's wrong with this student? And instead, what does this student need to feel safe and learn? That shift in thinking is where real change begins. Here are some key sources I drew from: Special Education Ontario, Growing Success, and the work of Stuart Shanker on self-regulation, and Ross Green's collaborative problem solving, and of course my own experience as a CELT teacher, supporting students and staff across our board.